Well, it's a real pleasure to welcome Judy Kridle for this episode of the Worship Lounge, where we will be talking about kind of the grief process that people might be going through, and also some of the spiritual turbulence that we're all feeling. Uh, we're very fortunate to have Judy, who has lots of experience in other churches, but decided to choose her neighborhood church. She lives nearby, and she had a career as an attorney, but in this part of her life, she's become a spiritual director. So we certainly value her input in so many ways. So welcome, Judy.
Thank you, Scott. It's great to see you through the computer.
It's the name of the game right now.
Yes, it is.
So we were just chatting before we started this recording about, there's no real answers. It'd be great to say, here's the few steps that you take to process, the feelings that people are encountering every day, different kinds of them. It's really quite turbulent, but sometimes just learning to be patient with where we are and the variety of feelings we might be having.
Yeah, right. Kind of letting the feelings come, knowing that they're not going to last forever. And also, having self-compassion, not beating ourselves up because we're not keeping it together perfectly. We're not, compassionate, or we're angry or sad or upset. So I think that kind of self-compassion is very important.
In talking with people that you have, been directing spiritually, what do you feel is, you mentioned before that you really kind of brought up something other people haven't brought up in these interviews, the whole aspect of grief.
Yeah.
How do you feel that people are actually in a grief process right now?
Yeah, it was quite interesting. I mentioned to my sister who lives in Minnesota that I was feeling really depressed about the situation. And a couple hours later, she sent me an article that was published in Harvard Business Review called "That Discomfort You're Feeling is Grief." And it's a short 3-4 page article, which is in the form of an interview with an author and grief expert named David Kessler, I believe. And he's a renowned grief expert. He worked with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross on who is famous for her, stages of dying. And he and Elizabeth worked on stages of grief, which are, you may be familiar, like denial is the first one, like, oh, this virus thing, it's not going to hurt me. Then anger, like how could our government have let this happen? And then bargaining, like, well, okay, I'll wash my hands, and and then in a couple of weeks maybe be over. And then the fourth step being, sadness or despair, and the fifth being acceptance. I found it really helpful to name what I'm feeling, at least some of the time, as grief for all the losses that we're all experiencing, the loss of our normal everyday life, the loss of income, the loss of maybe health, and also anticipatory grief, which is sort of grieving in advance of something that we think may happen. I might get sick, or somebody I know might die, or this shutdown may continue for, well past Easter, for example. So, and then this David Kessler has taken it one step beyond the 5 steps of grief to say the 6th step is the most important. After the fifth was acceptance, like, okay, I'm dealing with this. But the sixth step, he says, is finding meaning in the situation. And I found that to be so important in maintaining some sense of being grounded. Just to say this isn't just a meaningless, chaotic situation, and we can all find maybe our own individual meaning as well as a collective meaning in what's happening. You know, for example, slowing down, being a lot more intentional about connecting with our friends and our family, our loved ones, sort of looking at our values and saying, okay, what really is important to me? Those types of things that, you know, we don't really maybe take the time for, or not really moved to focus on when life is just normal and we're just going along. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just seems like I'm hearing a lot more people connecting in different ways with people. And just before we started this interview, I just got off a call that I set up with my cousins. And we've never done anything like this before. But everyone was so positive and excited about doing this. And it does make you think, why haven't we connected like this before?
Yeah.
There seems to be a kind of permission. In a way, there's a permission at this time to say, now is the time to connect in new ways with one another.
Right. Right. You know, and hopefully some of these, you know, good things, we'll be able to continue them after life gets more or less back to normal, which, you know, I hope and trust that it will eventually. So.
Right. So along the lines of acceptance, you had mentioned Rumi in all of this, and a specific poem. Would you like to read that?
Sure, I'd love to. This is a poem by Rumi called The Guest House. And I thought it came to mind when I realized I was having so many different emotions, you know, even within, you know, a few hours of one another. And this poem came to mind, and I hope that, that you'll enjoy it too. It's called The Guest House. This human being is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. And so I think this wisdom really of welcoming our experience, welcoming our emotions, even if they're like negative ones, and realizing that that, well, maybe they have been sent as a guide from the spirit to help us achieve some kind of new awareness or sensitivity or empathy or compassion, all those good things. And so I found it helpful just to think, okay, when I'm feeling really sad or bad or upset about what's going on, to sort of just not fight it, welcome it.
Right. You know, a sermon from one of the monks at the Society of St. John the Evangelist, this was years and years and years ago, spoke about the passage where the Apostle Paul talks about us as being co-creators with God. And he described a couple, an older couple walking down the street who see something incredibly unusual. And one of them turns to the other and says, "What do you make of that?" And it's such a wonderful idea that we have the opportunity to make something of this,
Mm-hmm.
even though we can't control it.
Mm-hmm.
There's kind of this sense of, what am I going to make of this?
Mm-hmm.
And it's even interesting to think about the church as kind of going through these grief processes where we're in a, kind of in a time of maybe a form of denial is to say we're going to just keep everything going the way it's supposed to be going, and it's always gone,
Yeah.
and or then we're upset at the disruption, or we're trying to save the church or something,
Yeah,
but
gosh, I'd already picked out, I was really looking forward to Easter, and I'm so mad that we
yeah,
can't celebrate it in church,
right,
or,
right.
or,
And there's no way to recreate it. There's no way, when you have an Easter experience where like families come together and you're flowering the cross
yeah,
that
yeah.
you've traveled with that week through Good Friday,
Mm-hmm.
or Good Friday is a wonderful time when people are, people who have lost somebody over the last year are invited to carry that big cross in the
Mm-hmm.
service, and it's so moving. But now we're stuck on these little screens, and so there's so many varieties of emotions and responses to this, and sometimes you throw your hands up. Other days you're feeling creative and you want to do something about it and apply your creativity,
Mm-hmm.
or just your love and concern for somebody in the congregation. And
Mm-hmm.
I find myself just randomly reaching out to people.
Hmm. Oh, that's lovely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Someone comes to mind, and you.
Yeah, because I was just thinking of you, and I thought I'd give you a call.
Yeah, that's lovely. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Right. Right. And hopefully you have a little more. I don't know if you really have more time for that type of thing or not, because you're doing such a great job creating these worship and scripture and coffee hour, all these different lounges for us to
right.
enjoy on Sunday mornings. But
Yeah, we sort of jokingly say if we get really good at this, no one will ever come back to church. To say,
yeah, right.
yeah, it,
From the comfort of my own home, huh?
what happened
I
to
can do
what
it
happened?
in church in my pajamas if I want. Right?
Yeah, what happened to that worship lounge?
Yeah.
It's like that cartoon I sent out the other day on my letter to the parish. About you can refill your coffee anytime you want. You can be in your
Yeah.
pajamas, and you can mute the pastor.
Yeah.
I mean, it's. I mean, how can you possibly top that?
Right.
Uh, but it's also it's so interesting to me that um, people who I'm connecting with in ways I don't know that I could have ever connected with them in this way
Hmm.
without all this added complexity.
Hmm.
Um, and people are very, very busy. And even when you interview somebody, I mean, there's a lot of freedom in this. We're like, okay, we could never have John Cater give a sermon. He's in
Yeah.
Hong Kong,
Yeah.
but
Right.
now he can do his usual wonderful reflection on a scripture, and he doesn't have to be here. And it only takes up he does preparation obviously, but then to be able to just utilize 15 minutes or so on a format like this
Right.
creates so much flexibility.
It's amazing, isn't it? Because otherwise you'd
Yeah,
have to fly halfway across the world to talk to us. And
right.
yeah, that was amazing last Sunday. I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Well, he's on this Sunday too, so
Oh, good.
uh,
2 Sundays in a row. Great.
he's really enjoying it as well, which is really,
Good.
really quite wonderful.
Yeah, I bet he is. Yeah, that little connection with us. Hmm. Right. That's wonderful.
How do you think we're gonna? How do you think the transition back to church is going to go? I mean, people, you've heard the president. You've also heard other people say, we're going to come back, and the first Sunday back, we're going to have Easter. I don't think I mean, that addresses the grief process a little bit. I don't think people are going to come rushing back. I think they might just be, well, let's give it a little longer, or I'm not yet comfortable. I mean, this has been a
Mm-hmm.
frightening process for people,
Yeah.
and sometimes you don't trust the assessments that people have of things, and so I don't particularly imagine everybody flocking back to church on the moment the
The
conditions
shelter in
been
place
lifted.
is lifted, or
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah, no. Yeah, especially if it seems like it's being lifted prematurely. Um,
yeah.
or that'll be interesting to see how our governor and our local um, governments handle that type of thing.
Mhm.
But yeah, I don't know. Will people have lost? I guess it's a question of trust, really. Can they trust that it's safe to come back? Um, and I don't know. It'll be
Mhm.
interesting to see. I haven't thought a lot about that yet. How will I feel when I can come in person? Will I feel comfortable, or will I be reluctant to sit in pews and share the peace, or take communion? Yeah, yeah.
Right.
I think it partly depends on how hard we end up being hit, and we don't know yet. In the Bay Area, how many severe cases, people in our area are going to have. And
So one more question before we run out of time here with our uh, reflections. But in terms of working through the grief process, I've noticed, and I've experienced it myself, that when I've been through a major loss, and remember my own parents, in each instance, when the family gathered, it was surprising to me how much laughter there was.
mm-hmm,
That we were sharing stories, we were remembering things, I can remember one time after my mom passed away, my uncle almost didn't come out. He was pretty frail at the time, and we said, we will make this happen for you, and he came out. Anyway, we were sitting and talking one night, and we got to laughing so hard. I don't know that we've ever laughed so hard, and it was all part of reminiscing, and the stories, the love. And I'm wondering if part of sorting through this grief is remembering to laugh, or giving ourselves permission. Um, and I see a lot of people sharing humorous things,
mm-hmm.
um, and I think, and we all appreciate them.
Yeah, yeah,
If we can laugh a little bit, right?
yeah. Laughter is a wonderful tension release, isn't it? And um, yeah, I think it's important to try to balance our sorrow and our grief with lighter moments, and that's a wonderful
Mhm.
thing. And it's a grace, to be able to laugh in the face of dark times like we're living in. Yeah.
Right. Sometimes I find myself asking people who feel kind of spiritually congested, two questions. When was the last time you cried?
Mm,
And when was the last time you laughed?
yeah. Yeah.
Uh, I think they're connected in some mysterious way.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
That they're very human. They're both connected to our humanity,
Yeah.
and our uh, so
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's um, to be in touch with your feelings and to be able to express them, without being self-conscious. That's a wonderful thing, both happy emotions as well as sad ones.
right.
So
Well,
I think,
thank you.
you give people permission to do that, and that's a wonderful thing. And I think
Hmm.
St. John's gives people permission to do that. That's been my experience of many of the members of St. John's that I've talked with and spent time with. Yeah. So. I love that. I love that about St. John's. Yeah.
Me too. Well, thank you so much, Judy, for taking the time to be with us. It's so nice seeing you. It looks like you're in a spiritual direction office. You've got that
I
wonderful.
am. I'm in my little tiny Japanese meditation room that it was an old, funky, dusty, cobwebby storage room, and I had a Japanese carpenter turn it into this little meditation room, like maybe, I don't know, 13, 14 years ago. And I didn't know at the time what I was going to use it for. And in fact, I just found a notebook today of and I had written in it, I don't know what I'm going to use my Japanese meditation room for, but I hope I'll figure out something out. And that was like 11 years ago. And when I became a spiritual director, it was suddenly obvious that this is what I need to use this room for. And so I do. And it's a lovely, peaceful, kind of Zen-like space just off my back patio. And I love spending time here. And I think people that I companion on their spiritual journeys, they find it a comforting, safe place to be too. So I hope that's the case.
Well, thank you for inviting us into that space and for sharing with us today.
Anytime.
I really appreciate it.
Delighted, and I'll look forward to connecting with other St. John's folks this coming Sunday at our virtual coffee hour, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's going to be quite different this week. We got some new ideas coming up. So
good. Okay. Not quite as much of it as a free for all as it was last week.
Well, we just feel like, one of the things that's been awkward for people is that it's a new format, and then nobody really knows if they should say something or just listen. So we're going to reintroduce things like the birthday anniversary prayer.
Good.
And the wardens are going to do a little update, and we're going to try live music, which is a trick on this format, but Ben has some ideas for that.
Great.
So it's going to be I'm going to try something. I'm going to try to inject a little humor myself in it, stealing a phrase from a good friend of mine who had a priest and who they described as giving their sermons as 60-second soul savers. And, so I'm going to do a 60-second soul saver on Sunday. So, or actually, it'd be today. We're recording this before Sunday, but this will
keep it short and sweet, huh?
Yeah,
like a lifesaver, but a soul is a soul saver.
Exactly. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Judy,
welcome,
and we'll look forward to the time when we can see each other face to face.
I will look forward to. Yeah, me too. All righty. Okay. Thanks again. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.